With a stockpile worth $3.4 billion in cheese, is it worth having $3.4 billion of cheese in our limestone vaults in the US? Or is it worth offloading that $3.4 billion and exchanging it for $3.4 billion of Bitcoin? I would wager that the utility of a new financial system and investing in that as a country would be a good idea. What is up, hackers? Welcome back to another episode of Hack Crypto, where we hack all of our crypto education. If you guys are brand new here, be sure to be subscribed with notifications on for my next fire video. Now, in this episode, I'm going to be talking about cheese. That's right, the US Strategic Cheese Reserve. Now, if you're wondering what this is and you haven't heard of it before, yes, in fact, the US has a strategic cheese reserve that is in a limestone vault. Many of you know that have been watching the channel for years now. I majored in economics in college. That was my love, my obsession with game theory and the Nash equilibrium, and everything around economics is super interesting to me. It still is, and I attribute a lot of that to why I initially got into crypto. So today I want to talk a little bit about the National Cheese Reserve that started in the 1970s and how all of this transitioned to where we are today with over 1 billion pounds of cheese. That's right. So why does this matter? Why am I talking about this? Because a lot of the controversies around the now crypto strategic reserve and the Bitcoin strategic reserve that the president just announced over the weekend, a lot of people have been messaging me asking, is this possible? Is this realistic? Why would we do this? What is a sovereign wealth fund? And I think that there's a couple things that I wanted to unpack in this video, but first I wanted to start out with the fact that many people don't know about strategic reserves and what they mean. And that's why I wanted to start with, ultimately, the cheese. So to kick us off, I want to lay the backdrop, some history here for the cheese reserve. In 1977, President Jimmy Carter basically said we need to subsidize the cheese industry. We need to get more production. We need to alleviate the crisis because there was a crunch. There was a bit of a dairy crisis in the US. And they need to help the dairy farmers out. So they decided, all right, we're going to create a reserve. We're going to get 500 million pounds to start. It's going to have a long shelf life. And the idea is that it stores value in this big limestone cave, a vault. So today, where are we? Today, we subsidize a lot in terms of dairy. So much so that 42% of the US dairy producers are subsidized by some form of government support. Now, I'm not for that, against that. I'm just laying this out so that everybody understands the backdrop as to why a national cheese reserve exists and why a Bitcoin reserve makes perfect sense here. So the idea around a dairy industry receiving $43 billion and $36 billion in 2016 and 2017, ramping up to now 42% of revenue from US dairy producers coming from some kind of government support. This is a lot. This is a lot of investment still in American milk consumption, and it's down. It's still down. A lot of people are looking for non-dairy alternatives now, and it's changed. So the idea around the Bitcoin reserve is where I want to come in now, because we can talk about lactose intolerant and people being dairy-free all day, but ultimately I want to talk about why this matters and why the idea of a Bitcoin and crypto in general strategic reserve is super important and realistic. Because if we are, as a country in the US, subsidizing 42% of the entire dairy producer market, and that's billions of dollars, $43 billion in 2016. What we need to think about here is around the financial infrastructure and the current rails that are in place. What does it mean for creating a crypto reserve that was announced over the weekend, which includes Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, Cardano, and XRP, 5 assets? Why is that so far-fetched if we are talking about cheese? And there was a shortage in cheese in the 70s, and here we are. So I put that question out there to people that have been in my DMs, people that are asking questions around the Bitcoin strategic reserve. I would position it next to the cheese industry or the dairy industry, where you have basically it was a shortage. It was a crisis back then in the 1970s. And today in the crypto space, there's been countless what you could consider crisis over the last 10 years, with FTX collapsing, all sorts of bad actors coming into the space, just doing infrastructure hit after hit after hit. And I would wager that the economic impacts here of a multi-trillion-dollar asset class is more important than cheese. Now, you could call me crazy. You could say, hey, Steve, you're lactose intolerant. What's going on? And in school, I remember studying it. And that was when the Temporary Emergency Food Assistance Program, TEFAP, was created, and it was giving away this cheese to food banks and community centers and helping people. So it was a net good that came from this reserve. And I think that that's really cool. I think that this cheese reserve actually ended up really helping people out. And I think it sparked multiple programs. It's just a fun factoid for everybody to understand about production, overproduction, what happens when you have a surplus, what happens when you put a bunch of cheese in a limestone mine. And I think there's so much kind of crazy things around inflation, where there was a 30% inflation on dairy products back then because of the shortage. And we're in an inflationary environment right now where it's a bit sticky. So just putting this next to Bitcoin, I wanted to pose the question to everyone. I think it's a fun exercise, not so serious, but really cool to see the similarities here of subsidizing cheese and dairy for billions and billions of dollars to accumulate a strategic reserve. And then next up, we have the crypto strategic reserve, where there could be a stockpile of that. I saw multiple proposals for buying, 200,000 Bitcoin over the course of 10 years. And I've seen a lot of really cool proposals being presented. The idea around a sovereign wealth fund is that basically the government comes in and buys real assets. Like they start vacuuming up different assets to put it into a fund and have people manage it. And it's almost like a hedge fund. But ultimately, it tracks. It's not crazy. It's not out there to think that this is possible, ladies and gentlemen. So that is it for this video. I hope you guys like it. Hope you learned a little bit about cheese. Hope you learned a little bit about how the surplus and the shortage began in the 1970s. And also, hopefully this helped explain why a strategic reserve makes a little bit of sense for the US and for other countries as well, not just the US. There are a lot of countries that are looking into this and they're very interested. So I would encourage, if you're watching this, to think a little bit more about why it makes sense to stockpile different types of crypto assets, but especially Bitcoin and Ethereum as the core piece here. That is it for this cheese episode. I will see you here on the next episode of Hack Crypto.